But what I love about coaching is that it's completely non-pathologized. That it is all about the way I experience coaching. It's all about self-actualization. It's all about aligning meaning and values, setting goals, doing the things in life that we really want to do with a supportive person who's not a family member or a friend, but also not a therapist. It's like a different kind of relationship, but with somebody there to cheer you on.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Consult a qualified professional for your needs. Views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and not necessarily those of Meet Your Mental Helper Podcast LLC or its affiliates. We are not responsible for actions taken based on this content. Welcome to the Meet Your Mental Helper podcast. I'm Jim Weisbecker, the host. I'm also a licensed professional counselor in Arizona who loves to talk shop with colleagues. And when I do, I'm always amazed at how much knowledge they have. And I think to myself, they should have a podcast or they should be on a podcast. But they're not celebrities. They're counselors, therapists, psychologists, life coaches of all type who grind it out every day in our community to help us grow and to help us heal. Without further ado, let's meet today's mental helper. Welcome to Meet Your Mental Helper, and today I am here with Jane Young. She's a master's level licensed clinical mental health counselor and a board certified coach. She's also an EMDR certified consultant, which stands for EMDR International, and has been in private practice since 2010. And she's also a professional animal communicator. And Jane, where do you do all this? Tell us where you're at.
I live on the south coast of Massachusetts in a town called Fairhaven, which is right next to New Bedford.
Okay, great. And you do virtual, yes, or do you do in person?
All of my work right now is online.
Great. So let's get into it. You've got a lot of experience in mental health, and I know you specialize in trauma, EMDR, and narcissistic abuse recovery. What kind of led you into that area, and tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, my own personal experience.
Oh, share only as much as you want.
Yeah, right. It's just in my early relationships, I had unfortunately a lot of experience in dealing with narcissistic abuse in my family and also in my marriage. That was a 20-year marriage, and while I was in graduate school was actually during the time of the end of my marriage, and a light bulb went off, and I started reading a lot about narcissism. This was in the early, 2006, 2008, when we were just starting to talk about this disorder, which is actually, I think it's more than a disorder, it's sort of a cultural phenomenon. And I just became really fascinated because so much of what I was reading was ringing true to my own experience and other people that I knew. And just naturally, like so many of us in mental health, we kind of gravitate towards that which we have some kind of experience or knowledge or passion about. And as I was on my own healing journey, I just felt like I was really motivated to help others, and people were just naturally drawn to me who were experiencing or had experienced this type of emotional abuse.
Gotcha. A lot of clients that I see will blame their partner, or especially if their relationship is crumbling, everybody's a narcissist. Right. It's kind of like ADHD. If somebody can't focus, they go, I got ADHD. They like to throw that around, or I'm OCD. Yeah. It's kind of one of those cultural things where people love to almost embrace those diagnoses today. Yeah. What would you tell somebody, or how would they kind of narrow that down on the narcissistic symptoms?
Well, I agree with you that it's become sort of a catch-all phrase and kind of, the disorder du jour, like a lot of things over
Yes.
time that we've seen. Uh, the way I think of it is that somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic traits is, in essence, a toddler. It's somebody has who's protecting something very precious inside and has built up a false self all around that with which they face the world. So these are people who can never be wrong, because if they're wrong, it's like death. It
Gotcha.
hits a shame place inside of them. And if you think about a 2-year-old who's shamed, or a
Mm-hmm.
toddler, it can feel like annihilation.
Gotcha.
And that's the real difference between somebody who is narcissistic and somebody who's just, a blowhard or
Right.
very self-centered. It's like those folks are not they don't carry necessarily this profound wound.
So toddlers also throw tantrums. Would that
Yes.
fit too?
Yes.
Stomping their
That
feet.
would definitely fit too.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
very vocal, very loud, very me, interrupts people.
Mhm.
Um, you know, can't uh, can't be wrong, like I said before. Yeah,
Well, that's a great way to look at it. They're like a toddler.
yeah,
Toddlers
yeah,
are the center of their own universe, right?
yeah, but not a happy toddler. A very wounded,
Okay.
injured toddler.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's an interesting way to look at that. And you're an EMDR consultant. You do a lot of EMDR. Maybe
I
kind
do.
of talk to how that fits into things.
Well, EMDR, as you know, is it's an evidence-based treatment for trauma. I see it as sort of like a power tool, and I use EMDR both in helping people really to untangle the negative beliefs about themselves from what happened to them, either in childhood or adulthood. And in narcissistic relationships, one of the things that happens with people when they come out of these relationships is that there's like this sense of self that needs to be rebuilt, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to reestablish that sense of yourself, because one of the things that happens in narcissistic abuse almost always is gaslighting, which is a deliberate sort of a deliberate tactic to pull another person off their center, to tell them that their experience of the world is not really what they're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. So oftentimes you'll see people who are very unsure of themselves, coming out
Mm-hmm.
of these relationships, have been told things about themselves for years that are not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so what EMDR can do is help uncouple that negative belief from the experience. And I found that to be really useful. The other thing where you and I met was in a class about
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, that
Right.
EMDR can be really useful in sort of helping to install a different sense of self, and
Mm-hmm.
using EMDR really to accentuate the positive and help people get a felt sense really in their body that they're okay, that they're strong, that they're smart, that they're creative, that they have a lot to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've personally used it for social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not far from Arizona State University, and I've had some clients without getting too much information. But social anxiety, especially you go away to college for the first time, it's a big deal. And I was just amazed at how well EMDR worked for that. There was always some past memories of a uncomfortable social situation where, as you're looking at it, you're thinking this is way over the top. You're making too much of it, but in there, but it's at that level of a blocking, painful life experience. So you process through those, and then the adaptive part's so helpful. So you're at that mixer or that party, or see yourself talking to people, and the results have been just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, there's a theory about how, what's that cliche that memories that fire together, wire
Wired
together.
together. Yeah.
And so that's part of what we're doing is uncoupling all of that, all of those stories that aren't really true. But they feel true because they're so ingrained in us.
Right. And I really enjoy, I mean, one of the things I'm really enjoying about EMDR now is the adaptive processing part of it, which kind of takes us to that coaching part. So tell us a little bit about life coaching as that's one of the things you do and that adaptive part of it.
Yeah. So I moved into coaching. Actually, I took a really comprehensive coaching class before I was even licensed as a therapist. It's kind of they sort of happened at the same time, but it took me a while to actually take the exam and get the coaching credential. But what I love about coaching is that it's completely non-pathologized. That it is all about the way I experience coaching. It's all about self-actualization. It's all about aligning meaning, purpose, and values, setting goals, doing the things in life that we really want to do with a supportive person who's not a family member or a friend, but also not a therapist. It's like a different kind of relationship, but with somebody there to cheer you on. And also when you show up and you haven't, done what you agreed to do that week or whatever, somebody to say, hey, okay, so this didn't work. Let's find a way that does work so that people who are having trouble getting going or reaching their goals or even setting goals in the first place don't have to rely or fall back on that shame feeling of like, I'm not good enough. I can't get stuff done, because you do have somebody there to help you and to frame it or try it a different way or just to support you in doing whatever you want to do in your life. And the thing about coaching is that coaching's been around for a long time, and in a lot of companies, executives are using coaching all the time, and that's how they get stuff done is by having having a good coach there to help them along
and I think
to challenge them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you made a good point. A lot of times we're trying to get certain things done in our lives, and family members, although they mean well, and even friends, even having coffee with a friend, they might, kind of fall back on that. Oh, just, get off your butt, get going, and so sometimes having a professional there makes all the difference.
Yeah. And family members sometimes have ulterior motives. A family member might say, Jim, you've always had social anxiety. I don't think you should really try that. Right. Where a coach will say, Jim, this is what you really want. And you have a history of social anxiety. So how can we address that and help you get what you want?
I could see that being really helpful for, say, a professional who their job promotion now requires them to speak in front of the board or team. They're now a lead at their company. They have to get up and speak in front of people, but they don't, need counseling. They just need to find that value that says I can do this, even though it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And having a complete stranger to give you advice is super helpful on that.
Yeah. And to sort of walk with you along the path in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I used to, in another lifetime, I was in sales and industrial sales. And I used to when I would go into a plant, I would tell the buyer, hey, I'm an expert on my products, on my materials. You're an expert on your factory. I said, so let's put our heads together and figure it out, right? And I think you kind of have that approach where you say, your clients are the true experts in their lives. I mean, we know our stuff, but they have a master's or a doctorate in themselves.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about how you promulgate that belief. Clients are experts on themselves.
That they're experts in themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really empowering way to approach our clients, is that it was with curiosity of like, and when I have a new person coming into my office,
Right.
I really keep that in the front of my mind of like,
Mm-hmm.
who is this person? How do they present themselves to me? What am I hearing? And also what's underneath that? And how can we bring out that knowing, like what they really know about themselves, what's really sort of driving the bus under there, and
Right.
how can we draw on those strengths that sometimes are pushed down or hidden
Mm-hmm.
um, or kind of undervalued,
Right.
especially people coming out of narcissistic relationships will often have very limited, really limited views of who they are and what their strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of doing a little bit of excavation of
Yeah.
help pull
And
that out.
maybe I should clear that up. When I say they should have a PhD on themselves, really, sometimes with psychotherapy in particular, that is part of the problem. They don't know themselves. But that could be somewhat the case too with coaching.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that sometimes people don't realize their gifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, an example of that would be somebody who doesn't realize that they're intuitive, that they
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping them with that, or people don't realize what their process is, how they solve problems. They
Mm-hmm.
may see themselves as procrastinators, or they may judge themselves to be people who don't ever get things done, and
Right.
really analyzing and studying what's really going on there. That can shift things for people.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about intuition. I've done something for a while I called heart math.
Mm-hmm. I'm
And
familiar with.
yeah, and I learned about it actually at a sports trauma training for EMDR. And all of the trainers were like, get it. It says, and it's not a promo for them, but it's a great system where you do heart focused breathing and you really tap into some intuitive stuff. But I'm not sure if that's the same thing what you're talking about. Tell me how you help people develop that intuition.
Yeah. Well, this is something that's very close to my heart. I actually learned deliberately how to access and strengthen my intuition, and I did that through learning about animal communication. And I studied with a woman named Penelope Smith, who is sort of the grandmother of animal communication. She's written a bunch of books and teaches workshops and all over the world, actually. And Penelope taught me how to listen with my heart. So just like heart math, right?
Mm-hmm.
With when you're practicing using your intuition, you are actually building a muscle that we are all born with,
Mm-hmm.
that get kind of diminished as we interact with the world. What a little kid really wants is to fit in. And so as soon as somebody says to you, like, no, dear, the cat is not talking to you, you're going to say, okay. Most kids will be, they just want to fit in. Like, okay, the cat's not talking to me. I won't fit in anymore. What I learned was that those skills can be relearned. And just like any muscle in the body, you can strengthen that capacity, that I call it a psychological function. We have an array of psychological functions, and intuition is one of them. And the way I learned, aside from Penelope's teachings, was that I was very involved with horses at that time.
Okay.
And I started going around to different people's barns, people I didn't know. It was just sort of word of mouth. People would call me and say, would you come to our barn, and I wasn't really charging anything. I was just learning. So I'd go to people's barns and I'd work with their horses and just take whatever I got from the horses and tell the people, and I was getting a lot of accurate information, and I was testing it out with animals I'd never met before and people that I'd never met before. And so as I kept doing that, I got more and more confident in what I was doing, and also learned how I was receiving the information, because when you are working with intuition, different individuals will receive information in different ways. So, for example, there's clairaudience, which means clear hearing, clairsentience, which is clear feeling. It's where you might feel things in your body. People often say like, oh, I got a headache when I talk to that person, right? Or felt it in my gut, or
the hair on the back of my neck.
On the back of my neck stood up. Exactly. Clairvoyance, which means clear seeing. And there's another one, but it's not landing with me right now. But what's interesting about clairvoyance is that we have this misunderstanding that intuition means that you close your eyes and you see visions. And that's just not, for most people, that's not true. We get the information in a variety of different ways. And the trick is, it's not really a trick, but the skill is learning how to kind of sift through very quickly and realizing what is coming through your intuition and what is coming from yourself. And a lot of times when we're just starting to do this kind of work, what's coming from ourselves is either we're adding on and embellishing and say, well, I think blah, 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 or we're doubting ourselves. And when I teach people how to communicate with animals, the first thing that we learn is how to get out of here, how to get out of our heads, and how to get into here, which, really connects with what you've learned through heart math, right? How to, there's an exercise that I learned from Penelope about opening the doors of the heart and sending a message out and receiving a message. And it's sort of like a gentle unfolding, sort of an awakening. And when we relearn how to do that, that's the beginning of strengthening those muscles, those intuitive muscles.
That's fascinating. The heart is an intuitive muscle, and you go through history back to ancient. What do they call that when they write on the caves? Hieroglyphics. But I mean, the heart is all through human history. Speak with your heart, do this with your heart. All the songs that have heart, it's like right there in front of us. And then if you look at religions, there's a lot to do with the heart, different heart. And then, but yet I don't think we always think about that. For example, if I'm hiking on a trail and I see a rattlesnake, the first electrical current comes from my heart. I think people often think it's the brain.
Yeah. Well, I think what we know about the heart now is that the heart contains neurotransmitters, right? Just like those in the brain, but they're in the heart and the gut too. Having a gut feeling is actually a thing.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we can't go into great detail on it, but if I were coming to you and going, how do I develop my intuition? Where would I kind of start? What would you start?
Well,
somebody on?
I think one of the easiest ways that I know about, I'm sure there are lots of ways that people develop their intuition, but the way that I'm most comfortable with and know the most about is communicating with animals. Okay. So that's sort of where, if somebody came to me and said, I want to increase my intuition, if they were somebody that loved animals, that would be a no-brainer for me. I would say, well, let's work on that. And really, I do it. I help people with using guided imagery and sort of helping them to get into a relaxed state, teaching them exercises about opening the heart. It's really nice to do this in groups and actually send information back and forth to each other
Mm-hmm.
and see what we get.
Mm-hmm.
When I've taught animal communication classes in a group, I can say with great confidence that 100% of the people will come out of the class with at least having a sense of their intuition and what it feels like, because we all have it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you are really closed off and this is something you don't want, or there's some part of you telling you that this is something that you don't want or that you can't have,
Right.
That's not going to work. But you do have to, like a lot of things, you have to be open and willing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about it is that once people sort of get a sense of what it is, it's really, it's just part of our nature. It's not rocket science
that we don't use.
Yeah, that we don't use. And once you start using it, it's available to you.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of communication with animals, if you're kind of heart focused on that or opening it up, can you give me an example kind of how that, you mentioned horses, how you started with that or what you noticed?
Yeah. So do you mean when I first started or what now? Or
well, just the process in general.
Yeah.
I have a cat that constantly wants to eat, and maybe I need to find out if she's bored or what's going on with her.
I really like her food.
She likes her kibbles, and yeah.
Well, when I started, I would notice it was almost like a voice in my head. I was like hearing words, not like hearing voices, like,
right.
that had any kind of weird quality.
Uh-huh.
It was just very much factual, sort of just the facts. And one time that I can remember, this was probably in 2001, maybe 2002, I was with somebody in a barn, and the color purple just kept coming up, and I learned very quickly to just say what it was, rather than feeling embarrassed, like, why would a horse talk about purple? This is completely ridiculous, doubting yourself, right? So I very quickly learned that I just had to say what I was getting. So I was getting some kind of voice saying, just giving me all these images of purple. It was like purple grapes, purple this, purple that. And so I told the horse's person, this is what I'm getting. And she cracked up laughing, and she opened up her tack box, and there were all these purple things in there. She said, I take my horse in parade, and when we go in parades, I dress him up in purple.
Oh, wow.
I put like purple,
cool.
things all over him. And she said, and he loves, I can't remember honestly, Jim, but I think it was grape. And she said he loves grapes, or with some weird fruit that, and there was some other, I don't remember what it was, but there was some other very odd food that horses don't normally eat. And she said, oh yeah, it was like cotton candy or something. I don't know.
Wow.
And she said, yeah, he loves that. So really, when I was starting, that's how I built my muscles. As I said earlier, is just
being receptive,
doing it and being receptive, and having the confirmation from the people really helped me.
Sure.
I had a pretty low confidence level at that time in my life. So I would imagine that some people, might not need to do all that work that I did to get going. But now I work with animal communication clients on the phone.
Wow.
And sometimes on Zoom, but usually it's just a phone call. And it's very fast. It's like usually sessions are a half hour. I can talk to 2 or 3 animals in that time. And people will call me with a whole range of issues, whether it's behavioral. As far as anything medical, I'm not a vet. So I'm very careful to be really clear with people that I do not I do not diagnose any disease. I do not tell people any kind of medical advice for their animal. But what I can do is get a sense of what's going on inside. Like sometimes I'll experience things like, it feels like there's this, darkness, or there's some kind of that feels yucky in their belly, or I'm noticing that there's something in the spinal area that feels out of whack. Like, do you have a chiropractor or a acupuncturist for your horse? Or, you might, next time you see the vet, you might just ask them to check on this, And one of the most sort of profound experiences I had with something like that was that somebody's horse it was like some weird, like, there's something, something going on inside that I didn't know what it was. And I felt, there was a part of me that's like, don't even say anything because you don't even know what this is. Right. But I said, I'm sensing this, like, there was something in the horse's neck. And like, it was probably 2 years later, I got a letter from the horse's person. And she said, just so you know, that the horse had a tumor and developed cancer and had to be put down. But she said it was in that exact
region
place. So I was so grateful that she wrote me and told me that. I mean, I just did this one communication with her. I really didn't have any other contact with her, but it helped my confidence a lot to
That's
hear
amazing.
That kind of...
Yeah. Do you think that's people, you always hear somebody say so-and-so is really good with animals. Do you think they have more of that?
I think so. Yeah, I absolutely think so. And the other thing is that you will see people who have, like, say, these remarkable dogs or these remarkable cats who do like crazy things with them, or who understand the English language. And when you talk to them, they kind of respond.
I've seen those videos.
Yeah.
On social media. Yeah.
Are they may be remarkable, but what's really most remarkable about them is that their people treat them as if they are equals, and treat them as as their friends and as their companions, and give them that kind of respect. And when animals are allowed to relax and be in a relationship with us, they rise to the occasion just like anybody. And and I've seen that over and over and over again. That
I remember our first cat was I wasn't her person, but I had the flu really bad. I'm in my robe on the recliner, just dying, and she comes and lays on me the whole day. And I always thought it's like she knows. Now some cynical people will go, well, you feed her so she doesn't want you to die. But I always found that interesting, I thought. And then once I got well, that she was gone again. She was kind of just doing her own thing,
Yeah.
But I think...
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Penelope Smith always said to us was that animals want to communicate with us, companion animals. Wild animals are, it's a little different, but companion animals want, they're like, it's like they're ringing the doorbell. They're knocking on the door. And when we allow ourselves to open to that, our relationships with them really change.
That's really cool. How do you apply that human to human then? You mentioned developing that in coaching. How do you develop that? I could see great applications for that. Yeah. With work.
Well, what I ask people to do at the beginning is to start noticing when they have intuitive experiences. For example, you're thinking about somebody and then the phone rings and there they are. That happens to all of us.
Right.
Or you're thinking about something and the next day you get something in the mail that is about that thing. So I ask people to make a special note every time something like that, even if it seems really minor and inconsequential, to write it down and keep a list and notice how, when you start noticing that these experiences usually start increasing and you start
Gotcha.
noticing more. And I teach people the same skills as I do with animals, is
Mm-hmm.
learning how to, like you were saying, breathe through the heart,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how to be mindful, how to slow down, how to
Mm-hmm.
notice how you get information, whether it's, you're hearing it, you're feeling it. When do you notice the tingle? A lot of people will notice the tingle up their spine when
Mm-hmm.
they're experiencing their intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, again, just like with animals, it's not rocket science. It's sort of taking a deep dive into yourself and getting to know how you, in your own unique way, experiences intuition. Yeah.
Interesting. I know they've done some research on electrical heart current, and they have been able to measure it as far as, I hope I'm saying this right. I think as far as like 15 feet or something like that. I'd have to look at the data, but quite a ways. But also, there's a heart math technique where you do that. You try to send
Yeah.
that energy out. But there have been a number of times where people doing virtual with somebody halfway across the country have said they weren't in the room, but they still said something changed as they were talking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There's a British biologist named Rupert Sheldrake, and he's done a lot of work on something that he calls morphogenic fields.
mm-hmm.
And his theory is that every living thing has a field around it that he calls a morphogenic field. And his explanation for intuition is that intuition happens when our fields are interacting with each other. And so when your field, like when my field connects with yours through here, that then we're sharing information. And he actually wrote a book called Dogs Who Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. He did a whole study in London of what, filming dogs and watching their behavior 10 minutes before their people came home and seeing what they did.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the one where the mailman's putting the stuff through the slot and the dog just attacks the mail. You've probably seen that one.
Right.
He knows when the mailman's coming. Yeah, that is amazing. So intuition definitely is something I think that would really be helpful, especially as you're planning your life and pursuing things and finding those life values that are going to make a difference.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is also really a wonderful thing is that a lot of my trauma people, my trauma clients, have a heightened sense of intuition. And it makes sense, right? Because when you are a child and you're in a chaotic environment or a neglected environment or whatever, that situation is, that's one of the things that you develop is a sense of intuition. Am I in danger? Are my needs getting met? Am I, it's by necessity that these children can develop a sort of a radar that is their intuition. And so I think that for some clients, it could be a really healing experience to be able to take that thing, that part of themselves that was alerting them to danger when they were little, and helping them to sort of reframe that and use that as a strength. And same thing with, with people who have experienced narcissistic abuse. They too, that you've been all the messages that are coming into you from the abuser are very, very negative. And so a lot of our sense of self is squished. But, for some people, that sense of intuition, that little voice inside that's like, no, this isn't right. That's often still there. And so drawing on the strength of that can be so healing, because for a lot of folks, that little voice inside that's saying, I don't think so, that's what saved them. That's what got them out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've had so many trauma clients, and I who have accomplished a lot of things, and they will often say, and I've told this to other clients, to, you know, as we talk about things, they'll say, if it weren't for this horrific thing that happened to me, I wouldn't be where I am today. Yes. I wouldn't be running my own business. I wouldn't be. And you might go, well, how did, let's just say, an assault or an attack do that? You know, but they had to develop strengths you don't think about. And then it adaptively, you know, something good comes out of everything. Adaptively, it made them a different person. Yeah.
And what I love about intuition too is intuition on its own isn't really one of our psychological functions, right? It's something that kind of latches onto something else. So intuition might latch on isn't a great word, but intuition might connect to your experience of thinking, or intuition might influence your experience of sensation, or your experience of impulse. You know, some people might impulsively do something because of their intuition, and then realize later, like, wow, I was in the right place at the right time, and I did the right thing. Isn't that cool? Right?
I remember before I went on my own private practice, I remember I had 3 job offers. 2 of them were really logical, geographically and everything else. And then I had just had an interview with one that seemed really logical. And as I'm driving home, the least logical one just hit me. This is the one you have to take. And I thought, it's a further drive. It's this, it's that. But it was just there. And I did it. And it worked out great. It meant, you know, I wouldn't probably be here now if I hadn't done that.
Wow. See, there you go.
Yeah. And I just remember driving back thinking everything about, and I liked the people. We had good interviews, but I remember just thinking, and I actually called, it was a Friday, and I think my former supervisor was trying to go home. I called him, I go, all right, let's do it. And he's like, oh, okay. He was kind of surprised. I didn't even get home and I made the phone call, you know? So that was one of those experiences where I think if you're, and then you kind of second guess and go, what did I just do? But it's just makes sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense.
Yeah. And what a powerful thing that you said, that you wouldn't be here today if you hadn't taken that, you know, apparent risk and done that.
Yeah. It's kind of frustrating because you're thinking these others would be a lot easier. You know, sometimes.
I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. Turned it off.
Oh, that's fine. No problem. We can edit that out.
Yeah, it was not a duck. It was my phone.
And speaking of editing, if we'll edit this out, but if I forgot to tell you, if anything digitizes, don't worry about it. It's actually being recorded.
Okay. So yeah, your face looks a little.
Yeah, don't worry about that. That's just part of the Riverside. Once it's there, it doesn't happen. Okay. So, okay. So what, where should we go next? How about energy psychology? Should we talk a little bit about energy psychology and how that differs from traditional therapy techniques?
So the energy psychology is a rapidly growing field. There's ongoing research going on to sort of prove that it works. But What I use, what I'm trained in, what I use with clients is something called EFT, which a lot of people, it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And what a lot of people know about this is it's a tapping on acupuncture points on the body while you are holding a thought. And I will teach this to my clients as sort of a self-help tool for them to use just in their day-to-day life. I have found it to be enormously helpful and even transformative in transforming limiting beliefs.
Okay.
Like if I'm having a limiting belief about something like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'll do a couple of rounds of tapping and it will shift whatever it is that I'm feeling very quickly, very efficiently. I know that some people use EFT for processing trauma, and I don't really use it that way because I'm so comfortable with EMDR. So I don't really use it that way, but it is, a lot of people do and have very good results. What I love about it is the rapid way it can help us to transform. I mean, just like in EMDR, how the negative cognition is transformed, that EFT can rapidly help to transform a negative belief that we may have about ourselves. I'm using it a lot as I'm transforming my psychotherapy practice into more of a coaching model. I have self-doubt. I am right there doing EFT because it works, and I think it's one of the tools that I have that I can say in my own life that it has made major changes, and also with my clients who use it. Some people don't like the tapping part, especially on the face. And so I will coach them around doing it differently, like just holding the acupuncture points while they're doing it. I learned EFT through an organization called the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology, which I can't say enough about this group. They do really great training.
So how long, if I'm a client coming in, how long could I be using this day one, or would it take a while?
You could be using it day one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I offer it as sort of part of the menu of resources for people. Like when we're doing EMDR, especially with somebody who has had a lot of developmental trauma, we want to make sure that they're well resourced before we go into actually processing the trauma. So EFT is one of the things that I'll teach people to use. So when they're, if they wake up in the middle of the night and they've had a nightmare, or if they're having a hard time, making a decision about something or whatever it is, that they have this tool that they can use.
That sounds great. I have a class on it. I've never watched it though. I bought a class on it. And it's sitting in the queue, and I've never done it, but I've heard so many good things about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I find it to be really fun. I find it to be a way that people can sort of have, sort of increases your agency in some way. It's like, I can do this self-help thing. I can help myself. It doesn't take a lot of discipline the way, say, a mindfulness practice. That takes commitment and discipline and really, making a promise to yourself that this is something that you're going to do. Where EFT, you can pick it up months later after you've learned it and utilize it and find the benefits right away.
That sounds great. And I could see where that would be really helpful in the coaching applications too, where maybe somebody's moving towards a new life value or goal, and that little voice is always back there going, maybe this isn't the best. Maybe you can't really do this.
Yeah. And so the way you would set that up with somebody is with EFT, there's always a setup statement, and you use these points on your hands, and you would say, like, even though I'm feeling really scared about this next step I'm going to take in my life. I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you give it a number. You say, that feels like it's at about a 7 in intensity, 7 out of 10, right? And as you do the rounds of tapping, you check in with yourself. Well, where is it now? And that number usually goes down pretty significantly. So that's another thing that I love about it, is that people can really gauge that it is helping them in the moment.
Yeah, I'm motivated now. I'm gonna go watch that class. And then when we're done, I'll get that information from you too, because I could use it myself. I do the flash EMDR on stuff like that. Sometimes I'll do something, listen to music or something I'm engaged in. That's something I'll use, or sometimes I'll just do my own EMDR on something. I don't write it out. I'll just mentally do the negative cognition, the positive, and just kind of notice what I'm feeling and tap it out. But this sounds a lot simpler, and you don't have to be trained in EMDR.
It is quite simple. Yeah, it's quite simple and quite transformational.
That's cool. And you also do hypnosis, is that right?
I do. And
how often do you use that? Is that something that I know I had talked to you about that way back, because I find that really interesting.
I use it pretty regularly with my clients. And I'm going to be using it, more and more and more in my coaching practice, I think, especially to help people connect to their intuition, right? A lot of times what I'm doing with hypnosis is helping people with resourcing, helping people to meet different parts of themselves, like say a wise part of themselves or a protector part of themselves. It's sort of a different way of doing parts work than some of us use, but ego state therapy really started with hypnosis.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I love about hypnosis is that it's a way for people to connect with their own creativity, right? Because they're going in, they're in a really relaxed state, and they're allowing their unconscious mind to just create the story. And it can be a very beautiful, rich story, and really change people's feelings about how they feel about themselves.
I know we all have a lot of stereotypes of hypnosis, right? So, in this context, you're talking about kind of accessing the subconscious. Yeah.
So some of the stereotypes about hypnosis come from what's called stage hypnosis. The person's on stage and they pick people from the audience and they have them come up on the stage and they bark like a dog or whatever it is that they do. So what's interesting about those hypnotists is that they're trained to pick the people out of the audience who are both highly hypnotizable and extroverted. And they can tell by the people who are pick me, right? And then there are other ways of, they do some kind of exercise at the beginning to sort of bring people into a trance. And so then they're scanning the audience to see who they can tell who's gone into a really deep trance really easily. So the ones they choose are both highly hypnotizable and extroverted. So they can be pretty sure that they're going to get what they're trying to elicit on the stage. So it's kind of manipulative. Where where clinical hypnosis that I'm trained in is really different. So I am always in contact with the client, right? So I'm asking them, like, if I'm guiding them, say, into a beautiful place on a gorgeous day, I will say, okay, in just a few words, Jim, can you tell me where you are? And they'll say, oh, I'm on a beach and the sun is shining and the waves are, and so then I get some information from them. Okay, so you're on the beach, the sun is shining, the waves are lapping on the shore. And so feeling the sunlight on your body, you can feel your body warm up, and you feel your toes in the sand. And as you're taking a few steps forward, you notice the, whatever. I use all the senses. So what you're hearing,
a lot of sensory information,
feeling, right? But it's really in partnership with the client, because we're in contact with each other throughout the process. So I know that person isn't going in, into a place in their mind that, might not be pleasant, might not be safe. And my feeling about working in altered states of consciousness is that we are responsible for being sure that we are not leading our clients into something that could feel unsafe.
Gotcha.
Because when you're in an altered state, you're vulnerable, and there's nothing to be gained by like saying to a client, "Well, let's go back to adolescence when you were being bullied, and imagine, right, being on the street and somebody's about to beat you up, right? That's just not how it works."
Yeah, I know in EMDR doing like Calm Place, sometimes, somebody will say, "Oh, I'm at the beach," and then they'll start crying and say, "But I realize I can never go there again," or something. Or I remember one was a campground. I'm just had, and this isn't the case, but it was something similar. My cousin shows up at that campground. We always get in big arguments.
Yeah. And you have to choose it. You have to choose something that's not. Doesn't have that charge.
At first they're like, I love this campground. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here comes so-and-so. Yeah. So that's really cool. So you're kind of I could see where for goal setting, or you're moving in a new direction in life, career, trying some new skills that you don't have a ton of experience with, but I could see where that would be beneficial.
Yep. And what you can do with hypnosis that's really cool is that you can add a future focus. So you can say, like, imagine yourself that you're walking down a road that's taking you through time, and you're passing by a year from now and seeing yourself, doing, whatever the goal is, or imagine yourself in 5 years from now, and really giving them a sense of that the future is something that they want to look forward to. You can also visit with ancestors. You can, it's really, it's such a creative way of being with clients. And what I love about it is sort of talking beforehand and kind of co-creating, like, okay, so, what are the goals here? What do we want to get out of this? And then it's up to me to kind of bring it to life.
Yeah.
For the client.
So when you're leading, I know a lot of people, that's one of their fears, is that you're, in hypnosis, they're going to be led. They're not really autonomous.
Yeah. In clinical hypnosis, the way I was taught is that it is the responsibility of the therapist to tell the client, and I tell them this every time we do hypnosis, that you are in charge, that you can come out of this experience anytime you want, that you can, all you have to do is tell me that you're going to be connected to me all the time. You're not going to be, out of touch. And so if something isn't going the way that you want it to, we change it, or we come back out of trance and we talk about it.
I see.
Another thing that we do in hypnosis that is really useful is something called a somatic cue. So, for example, if somebody say, I had somebody who had a fear of flying, and she was about to go on a transatlantic journey, and she wasn't afraid of flying. Actually, she was afraid of turbulence. When turbulence happened in the plane, she would get really anxious, and it kind of wrecked the whole experience for her, because she really wasn't afraid of flying. She really actually kind of liked flying, but the turbulence wrecked it. So what we did was, did sort of a generic hypnosis script. And then I asked her to put her fingers together. I think it was probably like this, to put both of her fingers together like this.
Okay.
And I said, and next time you're on an airplane and you experience turbulence, just put your fingers together like this, and your nervous system will know to calm down and to come back to this state that you're experiencing right now. And I got a postcard from her from Spain or wherever she was, and she's like, guess what? The plane ride was great. There was turbulence, and I did that, and I didn't have any distress.
Well, that's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that that's how people help with breaking habits, which I don't have experience with at all. But for somebody to say who wants to quit smoking, I think that's what you do. That can be a way of doing that. It's like, every time you feel an urge to have a cigarette, just put your hands together like this, and that feeling will go away.
Yeah, you probably saw the movie Office Space with Ron Livingston. No. Oh.
Now I need to see it.
you gotta watch it. It was made in I think the early 90s, but it's still relevant. And so anyway, the gist of it, he goes to a hypnosis, and the guy keels over dead while he's in a trance. So he tells him, and so then he's stuck in this state, but it changes his whole life. So I'm guessing that can't happen.
Well, that sounds pretty unusual.
Yeah. He goes, you don't care about I can't remember the exact part of the movie. You don't care about your job anymore. And then he goes, oh, and then the rest of the movie is him in this state of, wearing flip-flops to work and not caring. And yeah, gotta watch it. It's a classic. I
will watch it. Office Space. I'll remember that.
Yeah, it's a classic. So, kind of as we wrap up, Jane, obviously without mentioning names or people or change the identities, can you kind of talk about, work? You mentioned goals can be accomplished if they do the work. Maybe without giving a specific example, let's just talk about what if a client has to do work. A lot of them are thinking, well, is this going to be like a class? Am I going to be given assignments? Maybe contrast therapy and coaching and what the work looks like.
Yeah. So with my therapy clients, oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, but sometimes, I will present things that they can do. Like they could read a certain book, or they could do EFT on their own, or they could take a walk for a mile every day, or develop a mindfulness practice. These are a lot of sort of generic things that we do in therapy. But as a therapist, it's not my role to kind of hold them accountable for those things. It's like a lot of times people, they don't like homework. It's not, they don't want to do it, or they can't, or for whatever reason, that doesn't happen. In coaching, it's the way I see it, it's a little different, because part of my role is to hold people accountable. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but I do it in a very gentle way. But, coming back to at the beginning of the session and saying, okay, so last time we set these goals, where are we with this? Because you really want to help people move along towards a set goal or set of goals. So that entails them taking responsibility for what it is that they're wanting to do and for doing it. My job is not to, fix them or heal them or get them to be who they want to be, right? So having people understand that change takes work, that change and work doesn't have to be hard. Work doesn't have to be something that we dread. It can be something that's really, really fun. And all of us have to deal with this, right? Of like developing good habits. It's not, it can be kind of a pain. But part of that's what I love about coaching, is that that's kind of built into the model, that you're coming to me because you want to make some changes, and we've narrowed it down to what those are specifically in your life. What I love about the model of coaching that I use is that we are really focused on what is giving that person a spark in their life. What does it look like when their with their values and their purpose and their meaning are all aligned together? How does that change things for them? And I think that oftentimes we find, like you did when you had that intuitive sense and you went a different path, you were really following your will. You were using your will to say, this is what I want, right? And so part of coaching is helping people to develop that sense of themselves, that part of themselves that's really their true self, that really gets down into it, and to find out what it is that makes them thrive in the world. And so that's a real difference between coaching and counseling. Is counseling or therapy is about healing past wounds, healing past, sort of putting the pieces back together so that life can go on. My coaching clients are more people who are looking towards, as Maslow would call it, self-actualization, of living their best life. So, ideally, some of my clients have done their therapy work already.
Right.
And they've gotten to a place maybe where they're stuck. Maybe they're like, I've been in this job forever, and I hung on to it because I had to feed my children. I was a single mom. Now my kids are all grown up, and I'm like, what do I do now? I really want to be, I really want to be a witch or whatever it is they want to do. Yeah. And I will, I will walk with them on that path.
It's tough. Now this is more from therapy, but I'll hear this a lot from clients. I hate my job, just hate it, but I can't make as much money doing something else. And so I'm stuck. I have to, I can't, I would love to just be done with it, but I can't get the income I am getting now if I go somewhere else. And I'm kind of like, but if you hate your life and it's making you sick,
Yeah. Well, I think that is a really good place to start introducing intuition and teaching people skills around learning who they really are, learning what it is, what do they value, defining if they could leave their job, what could that be, and start working towards whatever that is. And I think that you've probably seen in your own life and in your clients that sometimes things just open up and they change, and new opportunities come along that you never thought would be there. But you do have to get yourself in the zone, or in the way. It's like you get yourself in a wavelength where you're actually open to things happening, and for some people who are very, very wounded, like we were talking about earlier with narcissism, right? Some of those folks are limited as to how far they can go because they get stopped by their own inner.
That sense of self is they're kind of like, is anything true? Anything I've been. Right. I remember a client saying, I'm beginning with I don't know how many years. I'm starting to realize all of it was fake. They were with, in a narcissistic abuse situation, but it was kind of cool too to see them getting that, starting to realize, once they got away from that person.
And that's part of the healing, right? Is to sort of unpack it, and then repack it and put it away, and then doing something new.
Last thing, let's finish on this. How do you help somebody find their life values? I always tell people a goal is just something you accomplish. But a value is what you're about. Like, and I use this example of selling widgets. I go, one guy has a goal to sell 10 widgets. One guy, widgets are a life value. So he reads books on widgets. He goes to seminars on widgets. He, everything is widgets. He hits his 10 widget goal and he sells another 20, 30, 40. So how,
Yeah.
I go, that's a life value versus a goal. Do you agree with that? And
Yeah, I agree with that. And like you were saying, I think you said values make us who we are, right? And
they define us.
They
Yeah.
define us, right? And so for some people, say people who have been in an abusive relationship, they've been defined by somebody else. And so, you have to kind of untangle that, those false definitions, but they've got to really get it. They've got to really have some experiences where they and for some it's what they're getting from the world and how the world sees them, and it takes time to realize, like, well, wait a minute, this person in my life was telling me I was all these things, but everybody else in my life is telling me is a really different story. And being able to take in those new stories and recognize that, no, this is the reflection that I'm getting back, that I want to aspire to, right? And I think of narcissistic relationships as looking in one of those mirrors at the fair that make you look all distorted, you know, and you're like, what? And then once you break out of that, it's sort of like you rebuild your sense of self, partly by being in community with others, and also by taking a really deep look at what it is that you do value. And it may be by doing activities like keeping a journal, or it may be taking up a new interest that you've always wanted to do, trying new things, or learning a new skill that you've always been told that you couldn't for whatever reason.
And I could see that for coaching too, if you're looking to make a big change in your life. I use a value questionnaire, life value questionnaire. I think it's from some DBT book, actually, but it goes through like 10 life domains. And I always tell people, only don't answer it with the little, your mom telling you what you should be doing, or the little devil angel on your shoulder. Just what sparks you, even if it's not logical, even if it doesn't. I go, this is just, be really selfish on how you answer this. Yeah.
What are the things that you hold dear, right? The things that really are important. I mean, those are our core values. And oftentimes, if we have a negative belief about ourselves, we're kind of separate from what our values are. We may feel like we don't deserve to have values, or that our values are not real or not authentic in some way.
So I think it's I could see that for somebody, making a big change, how that would be helpful. To kind of get in touch with that. So this has been great, Jane. We'll have to do it again sometime. And I will put links below on how to get a hold of you for anybody watching this who's in the Massachusetts, Vermont area. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I'm licensed in Massachusetts and Vermont for coaching. I mean, for counseling,
but coaching
and
the
for
whole
coaching, world. The whole world is
the whole
open.
wide world.
So you live in Austria or anywhere, England. I unfortunately I don't speak any other languages than English, but
gotcha.
Other than that,
no,
anybody's
we'll post that at the bottom. And again, thanks for your time today. And I learned a lot, so I would definitely be interested in a lot of the things you talked about today.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was great. So again, I'll post those
links on the bottom for you to contact Jane, and have a great rest of the day, Jane.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Meet Your Mental Helper. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find them on our guest directory at meetyourmentalhelper.com. You can find their social media links to follow them and also ways to directly contact them. If you would like to be on the podcast, join our Meet Your Mental Helper network. And we have several memberships that support the work we do that allow unknown experts to be seen. Look forward to hearing from you soon and see you at our next podcast.